and welcome to another episode of FooBar. In today's video, I want to talk about the different ways that you have to work with AWS CDK and Step Functions. This video is part of a Step Functions playlist. I already covered in another video how to use Step Functions with AWS SAM, so if you use that framework, go and check that other video. In this video, I will be talking about the two different ways that you can create a step function workflow using CDK. So let's get started. So the first way is what we have been doing, using the ASL, Amazon State Language file, the template, as we did with SAM, and creating the workflow like that. So let's go to the code and see it in action. So I have here the project. It will be available in GitHub for you. So here is our stack and here is our state language. So this machine is this one. If you have not watched the video on when I talk about the new external HTTP endpoints that you can call from Step Functions, this is the state machine from there. So we can call that third party invoking that HTTP. Then there is some error handling, and if there is some error, it will send us an email. So that's the state machine. I just basically grab it from that video. And here is the code for CDK. In this code, I'm not creating the resources that we need in order to get the HTTP endpoint. We will need to have a topic because this is publishing a message to the topic. This is also connecting to an existing connection, event bridge connection, and there is the API endpoint that we have created. So all that I have been working on the HTTP video. Go and check it out if you want to know what I did. So here I just have it in a configuration file. You have the example here. Go and check it out, what you can find. So the first thing I'm going to do is create the policies. We need to create policies in order to give the state machine permissions, in this case to invoke the endpoint, to get the secret from secret manager, as we said that connections use secret manager, to retrieve that connection, and to publish a message into a topic. So those are the 4 permissions that we are going to do. And we are going to create a role for the state machine, adding those policies. So that's the first step, and this is something that you might have seen in CDK. And then how we construct the workflow is very simple. We have the definition as a file, we pass the ASL, then we pass the role, and then as we did with SAM, we do the definition substitutions. In here we have the endpoint, the connection ARN, and the topic, and these are exactly the same words that we have here, and this is just doing the substitution. So when we deploy, we will end up with a state machine that looks something like this, that is exactly like the state machine that we have done before. I can execute this one. And if you remember from this video, it depends on the result on this, calling this third-party API. Sometimes it fails. If it fails, it will send a message, and there is some retries and errors and things like that. Here we just get an email. That's the first way of doing it. Now let's look at the native way of CDK of doing Step Functions workflows. And Step Functions has many constructors that allow us to create these workflows natively. So we can check that out. There is a project library that has these Step Functions modules, and here it explains a little bit on how to create those things. It's a lot of information, and you can also find them when you need the particular state. So if you go here, you can see how a little bit of the information on the task, on past, and wait, and choice, and how you can define those. I will show you an example now that will be trying to build that workflow that we have calling the external endpoint. But because how this works, let me show you. Let's go step by step. But the first thing you need to understand is that you are going to build natively this object. So you are not going to have a ASL file. You're going to build everything as CDK. So for example, here, when we call SNS, we have to do new task called AWS service. And if you see this, I can show you. I'm going to do test, new task. And here you can find all the different tasks that are available. And if you look, not all the integrations are here, at least not yet in CDK. So the calling an HTTP external endpoint is not yet available. So I cannot do that. I need to basically call an API gateway. So in here, our state machine will not be calling an external endpoint, will be calling an API gateway, but then the retries and catch of errors and everything like that will be exactly the same. So that's why there's a difference, and we need to wait until that's added to CDK in order to use it. So let's go from the beginning. Again, we need to give permissions to the state machine to publish on the topic, and we need to give permissions to the state machine to workflow to access that API gateway API. Then we will create the role. Again, we give these two policies to the new role for the state machine. And then we can use that when we create the role. We have it here. You can see that the definition, it comes from a chain, and we will give the first state for this state machine. And if there will be multiple steps, we can do dot next, and we can do that. We can also build choices and parallels and things like that in here. But this state machine only has one state, and then the publish to SNS is a fallback state. So that's why it doesn't appear here. Our state machine is one state, and is this invoke HTTP endpoint. So the first thing we are going to do in here is to grab that API gateway, and then we are going to call that API gateway. There is an integration from functions to API gateway, so we can use that one. We pass the API, the stack, the method, and the path that we want to call, and that will call the API gateway. If we look at the ASL from the previous example, that is the one that we want to replicate, instead of here having the API gateway, we need to have this fallback state, and we also want to have retries in here. So we want to have these retries. So what we can do is we can add a retry to that invoke HTTP endpoint, and here we can configure the retry. When we do it in ASL, it looks something similar configuration. So here you have it in ASL. And then what we will do is create a new state, and this one is the one that publish to SNS. Again, we say service SNS, action publish, these are parameters. And then we can add this SNS sending notification catch as a fallback state when there are this error. And this is how you build a state machine. In my opinion, this is a little bit more complicated than using ASL, because when you use ASL, you can always fall back in the workflow studio. You can build it there. You can take it to your own IDE. If you're using App Composer, you can play with that directly from Visual Studio Code. And if you're using CDK, you have to rely that the components are there, the constructs are there, like in the case of invoking an external HTTP, they are not yet there, and you need to make sure that everything is configured. Then there is multiple plugins that you can do, that you can convert this CDK into ASL and the other way around, but yeah, I prefer always the ASL. So when we deploy this, it will look something like this. So when it's do CDK deploy, the definition becomes ASL, because CDK will transform it into ASL. So everything that you configure there will have ASL, so you can see it from here. And you can also do the execution. It works in the similar way than the other one. It will call that API gateway. The API gateway might fail, as in this case, and there is a retry. And if the retry fails, then it will send the message to the SNS, and it will get an email. And it just looks very the same. So that's the video for me today. It's a short video, but I want to show you these two ways of using CDK and Step Functions, because this is something you have been asking. I will leave you some resources in the description box where you can find how to build these state machines with a CDK natively. I will not cover that more in depth, because depending on what you want to build, how you're going to build it, and I like more the ASL way, so I will keep on doing that. But yeah, you can definitely bring your ASL file into CDK, or you can use the native way, whatever you prefer. You can find as well the video for SAM if you're looking for that, and if you want to see the code for the HTTP external endpoint invoke, I leave you the video here, and that's the video for me. Here you can find also all the playlist for the functions where I am uploading all these videos. And I see you in another episode of FooBar. Ciao, ciao!